Mi nombre es Jonathan Soto. Hey, what's going on? It's great to see you again. How's everything? Good? Good. No, y estamos aquí y vamos a hacer las introducciones ahora. Uno de nuestros panelistas, Reverend Damaris Whittaker, from the UCC. Ella se quedó in Chicago and her airplane got delayed. So she sent us a video of the amazing work that the UCC is doing. So I think to start off, I would like to show that video because it demonstrates the kind of potential engagement and activity that's surrounding faith-based engagement as it relates to the issue of Puerto Rico. Hey, ¿cómo estamos? So we're going to show that video soon, but I would like to just do a quick round of introductions. If we could just start this conversation, and we have some action items that I'm very excited about that is really going to think about ways we can advocate moving forward. So without further ado, I would like to introduce my fellow panelist, Reverend William Rosa Jr. Y vamos a empezar contigo, pero antes I would like to get a sense of, you could just say who you are, your affiliation, and ways that you think that the faith community could work on this key issue. Solamente su nombre, su afiliación y la manera que tú piensas que la comunidad de fe pueden ayudar en esta situación. Carlos.
Buenas tardes. Carlos Puentes. I'm with National Grid Power Company up in Normandy, and I'm here with my colleague, Miguel Santos. And I'm just interested in hearing, how this can help the situation.
Excellent.
So I can bring back some of the information back to my corporate people. Hoping to do anything we can do to help.
Good. The energy sector is critically important, especially as we think of houses of worship as having space and land. Just as a brief introduction, I used to lead the City of New York's faith-based engagement for Mayor de Blasio. And one of the things we partner with houses of worship here is identifying underutilized air rights and also vacant land as a mechanism for creating affordable housing for folks. And I think that there's a lot of city-to-city partnerships that could also take on infrastructural issues like energy provision as well, and thinking about sustainability and all those concepts. So it's great to have you here. Thank you so much.
My name is Miguel Santos, Deacon Miguel Santos. Yo soy diácono en la Iglesia Católica in Buffalo. We, in our community, have partnered. We don't have a direct Latino-based organization anymore, so we in Buffalo came together, and the Catholic Church in particular took a major role so that we can have find housing, because through Catholic Charities we had refugees, a lot of refugees, but now the number of refugees dropped. But those apartments that were identified were now going to the Puerto Ricans that were coming in. We had probably about 900 somewhat families that came to Buffalo alone. And so through Catholic Charities and our affiliated organizations, we provide housing, furniture, utensils, everything for someone to start a household. Then we have other organizations that will work with education, stuff like that. So,
fantastic. Thank you very much. Aquí a la esquina.
My name is Damaris. I'm from Springfield, Massachusetts. I'm part of the Alliance for Puerto Rico, and I'm basically here to learn as well.
Awesome. Thank you so very much for being with us. Gilberto?
I'm here to her support. What I can learn or what I can do.
Awesome. Thank you so very much.
My name is Carmen Cruz, and I live here in New York. I initiated and organized the silent procession New York City for Puerto Rico back in November 19. It was the same day as the Unity March, so people had a choice whether to, they couldn't go to Washington, at least they were able to participate in something for Puerto Rico. And the whole intent of the silent procession you know, I feel like, like the Jewish community, okay, to put it in here, because I don't want to keep on, but the Jewish community doesn't allow you to forget not one day about the Holocaust. And the silent procession is committed to not allowing anyone to forget about Puerto Rico's struggle and humanitarian needs. That's in a nutshell.
Yep.
So
Awesome.
anyone, that is interested, I will give you my card, and we can talk later on.
Good, that's fantastic. I think the symbolic nature of a public prophetic witness, especially during these times, is important. As we know, June 1st is the beginning of hurricane season. And how do we think about a liturgical component on that day, which falls on a Friday? With thinking of hurricane season as the symbolic death, public crucifixion of the Puerto Rican people through the tarp as an image, thinking about how we could do a public action on June 1st throughout the nation with a public demonstration on Friday, Saturday, a big gathering in your respective city, and Sunday, the unveiling of the tarp as a resurrection symbol, right? So the idea of having to reimagine liturgical kind of frameworks to express the kind of violations that we see is key. One of the things that I wanted to highlight is with us, we have a very special guest, Carlos. Carlos is actually one of the students that comes to us from NYU, the HMAP program. The HMAP program was a program that was opened up for students to be able to be in universities, but that program ends on Wednesday. And we know that I went through transitions growing up and understanding that higher education is key. We are trying to get a letter together, sent to the NYU president, advocating on behalf of Carlos for him to stay. We don't know where that's going to go, but maybe if you could just speak a bit about your experience, Carlos, just in ways you feel appropriate, but there is a letter that's being worked out that I would like for folks to see if we can support in any way that we can help.
So just to provide some background, I got here in January. The program was established around November, so NYU admitted approximately 57 students. The experience was amazing, mostly because most of us never expected to have the opportunity to go to a university like NYU, and it's been surreal, and we're immensely grateful. Mostly, it's that in the last 2 months, we realized, noticing all the news coming from Puerto Rico and everything that came after the hurricane regarding government policies, labor reform, the attacks on the education system, that Puerto Rico is still very, very unstable. With the power outages, with the coming hurricane season, we became very concerned, and we continue to be very concerned for what that could mean for our future, what that could mean for our education system, and whether we can actually finish our careers there. For me, primarily, it's my mental health. I'm affected by economics too, because my parents could lose their job at any moment. But in my family, we struggle a lot with mental health. I was kind of depressed. I have an anxiety disorder, which was very much triggered by Hurricane Maria. After the aftermath of the hurricane, I was evacuated in Whittaker West because an ammonia tank was about to explode. I had my boyfriend, ex-boyfriend at this moment, almost killed me because he went on one of his rage moments, because the reality is that in the aftermath of Maria, everybody was so tense and everybody was trying to survive, but the reality is that some people can't handle it. And he was resorting to drugs and alcohol. And at some point, he almost crashed a car because he was enraged. My mother became sick. We spent 4 nights in the hospital on generators. And my brother became sick too. So everything that happened has left me with immense amounts of mental instability. And it affects me both psychologically and physically. And so, personally, I will struggle going back to Puerto Rico because I haven't been able to recover from that and from what happened. And I personally need more time. And so that's why we organized to write a letter to NYU asking if they could extend their program for another semester.
And the key here is that through our houses of worship, we have contacts that can connect directly to the president of NYU, some of our institutions, but I think this is a microcosm of why we need to never stop stepping up right? The mental illness, right, and mental kind of saying exhaustion and mental trauma that our people have experienced calls us to raise a moral imperative and talk about how our faith has to stand in the gaps for our fellow Puerto Ricans that are here. So I'm going to ask if folks could support with the sign-on letter, if you can, and on behalf of your organizations, or speak to people that know. We're trying to get something out by Sunday to the actual president. So I just wanted to highlight this because it's important that we do good while speak good as well.
Carlos, how many students, are you the only student there from the program?
It's 57 students.
57?
We did a survey, 32 people responded, 27 at the moment would be interested in staying. The ones who wouldn't mainly has to do with policies regarding graduation and having to spend their last semester there. At the moment, a lot of the struggle also has to do with Puerto Rican institutions saying that we can't. It's on both sides. NYU is saying no, but Puerto Rican institutions are also claiming that everything's okay. From experiences and the knowledge, I do not think that everything's okay in Puerto Rico, but they're basically trying to protect their image, and therefore they're making sure that we can't claim that there are issues in Puerto Rico so that we can't stay.
So
Well,
maybe,
I'm mainly concerned in terms of you reached out in terms of getting services, for mental, for your.
Yes.
Okay, because I would have connected you to someone, but if you already have.
I'd still be interested.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay,
see, there
so
we go.
can talk later.
So maybe that could be a follow-up. And
That concern, because the anxiety and all that cuffs you, doesn't let you move. So
That's right.
got to get rid of that before you can move forward. You have to have a clear mind, and your soul has to be in the right place. So, yeah.
So Carmen, can we make sure that we connect and
Yes.
follow up directly after this? And then at the end
Absolutely.
of this session, we'll just recap quickly some of the items we discussed. Jose?
Oh, yes, I am Minister Jose Antonio Gonzalez Rodriguez Hernandez Jimenez de Jesus.
Excelente.
I live in Manhattan. My parents migrated first here in the 50s, so I'm first generation born here from Puerto Rico. My church is in the Lower East Side. I've been a minister for many years, just serving our community, involved in activist roles, social justice type of reforms. I've been a shop steward at Mount Sinai, Beth Israel, where I worked for now close to 30 years. Obviously, I have family in Puerto Rico, as many of us do. I have family in Isabela, Toa Alta, San Sebastián, Aguadilla, Moca, and so there's a lot of concern there, and there's a lot of depression, as the brother here was mentioning, and that's probably one of the issues that's been least talked about, is the mental health aspect of this Hurricane Maria. I remember my sister-in-law calling my wife from Puerto Rico a few days before, huracán, like we're preparing, but they didn't know that it was going to be that grave of an issue. It's kind of like us here, when Sandy hit, we didn't know it was going to be that grave of an issue. And so imagine in this great metropolis, all the resources that we have and how much and how long it's taken for us to recover here in New York, Manhattan, and the surrounding boroughs. That we can't even imagine what the people of Puerto Rico are going to. And that's some of the things that our officials, and we want to hold them accountable. In my district, it's Carlina Rivera. I do believe Governor Cuomo has stepped up to the plate where the federal government and President Trump has not stepped up. And so being involved in the union aspect of it's also helping because, we have the support of our governor. And I think that's one of the things that we need to also tap into, maybe some union supports. When the membership is there, there's a lot of Puerto Ricans and people, Hispanics and Latinos in general that can just come around this issue and come forth, so that we can sharpen it, as the Bible says, iron sharpens iron, and we can bring that forth. Jump in, sir.
And thank you so much for that framing. Councilmember Carlina Rivera actually signed on to a letter of support that was also sent out by Corey Johnson, who is the city council speaker. And it would be great to get faith institutions listed there. So I think that we have so many different points of convergence and intersections of effectiveness. And that's why I wanted to introduce one of our panelists, Reverendo Rosa Jr., Reverendo. And I think we were just joined by someone in the background. If you could just briefly introduce yourself. And thank you for joining us.
Soy Heriberto Martínez. My name is Heriberto Martínez. Yo soy de Puerto Rico, Puerto Rico. I just came yesterday.
Welcome.
I'm a pastor over there.
Excelente. Bienvenido, Pastor. Gracias por estar. Thank you so much for having us here today. But without further ado, Reverend, today we wanted to talk about the what, the when, and the how, right? Like how have communities of faith, como comunidades de fe han respondido a esta situación que ha sido extendido. Para mí me parece mucho los 40 años que estamos navegando en el desierto, aunque our sustenance is very low. There's miracles happening that are unseen, and I would like to get your experience on how you and your faith community has engaged, and feel free to be comprehensive if you like. We're going to end with a video that one of our other panelists didn't show, so I just wanted to give the floor to you, and let's make this a dynamic conversation, so feel free to jump in, and Reverend.
Thank you, Jonathan. Absolutely. I want to thank Dr. Melendez and the Centro for inviting me to be here. William Rosa Jr., Rosa, I'm with Calvary Pentecostal Church. I'm the founder of the Help Save Puerto Rico initiative. We're in this for the long haul, and this is what I want to talk about today. By the way, my handle is broken, so it's going to look a little awkward. And I have a tendency of speaking low, so if you can't hear me, please ask me to raise my voice.
Absolutely.
The Help Save Puerto Rico initiative, we're in this for the long haul, represents a spiritual response to the crises facing Puerto Ricans in Puerto Rico. It is a series of historical events created to offer living hope to Puerto Ricans based on a firm belief that God loves Puerto Rico. Now, why historical? Because when future generations look back at this period, looking for lessons to be learned when they face their crises, what we do here matters. How we handle the situation is not only important for now, but for future generations. And so we need to step to the plate and step forward. One other thing, I'm very emotional. So if you see me getting emotional, that's the way I am, okay?
You're not alone.
Yes. It seeks to instill actionable faith and courage into the hearts and minds of the Puerto Rican people. Hope that a better and brighter future for Puerto Rico is on the horizon. Faith intended to build courage and valor for the task at hand and the fight ahead. It is a fresh new vision premised on a promise already anchored on the conviction that in possibly one of the darkest hours in the modern history of Puerto Rico, God has not abandoned it or its people. Some have suggested that God is punishing Puerto Rico. That is not true, okay? And I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. All right. The initiative has 4 goals: to help restore the mental and physical health and spiritual well-being of the Puerto Rican people, to alleviate the suffering by helping to restore livable levels of hurricane-proof energy in housing, drinkable water, and effectuate essential infrastructure repairs. We're not going to wait until that debt with PREPA is done. We need to intervene and to do something now, okay? When I was down in Washington, D.C., I had the opportunity, I guess it was God that brought us together. It was a scientist, Puerto Rican from NASA. And he says, I have a network, and I saw him, his heart was into this when he was talking about how we need to do something about the energy problem in Puerto Rico. The third goal is to help reduce the debt through bankruptcy or other legal and political means. It's not just humanitarian relief. It's not just faith. We need an action people. We need to inspire people to fight for Puerto Rico for its future. All of you who have know what the deal is with regards to the debt and all of that, we need to do something, and I'll explain a little bit of something about that in a little while.
And just to quickly comment on the health and mental health aspect, it looks like it's a common theme that has been coming up and surfacing in this specific conversation. Reverend, I'd be interested to hear what was the impetus, what was the el impulso for you to think about health and mental being as part of this initiative, because we know mental health is highly stigmatized in our faith communities, and we have to destroy that stigma. How do you...
Just look at those pictures on the internet, esas caras de nuestra gente, sufriendo, andando casi descalzo, cruzando charcos de agua. Look at the suffering in there. I used to be for the Methodist Church executive for national health, so I have some background in this, but I don't need that background to be able to justify what we need to do about mental health. We've been here through blackouts at least 1 day or 2 days. Imagine all of those days that these people are out there drinking water that's not healthy, without any lights, having to deal with nature and the insects. That's what instilled this. And this is not just for me to make a statement. This is a call to action. Our religious community and our mental health people need to come together and design a plan and do something about that. But we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute.
Yeah, I don't think there's enough media out there covering this. Everybody's getting complacent right now. I know up in Albany, everybody thinks that a lot of this issue in Puerto Rico will eventually go away. And there isn't enough people in the community taking part and putting their heart and soul into it and driving the agenda to get some more help, especially with this administration.
Yeah.
This is so important.
Not enough is being done.
By the way, we were joined by a guest. I just wanted to say hello. If you could just introduce yourselves to the group.
I'm actually with Centro, the media department.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being with us.
Because a part of we are in this for the long haul, okay, addresses that. We need a national, state-by-state, concentrated public relations campaign to keep this issue alive. I was at the Unity March on the 19th of November, and the people who were there made a noble and a good effort to get this together, and we had cooperation from CNN, but this has got to be done at a state-by-state level. What I mean by that is that each state where Puerto Ricanos are, or the friends of Puerto Rico, should be creating events in those states that bring about national attention, para que así no nos gastemos, no? Each state plays a role and keep this alive and well. We have to work at changing public opinion. People don't know that we're American citizens. People don't know how we're being treated. People don't know that the reason why we're not getting bankruptcies is because Congress, in an underhanded manner, took that away from us in some of the other territories, and now they're out there saying that we don't qualify. One of the initiatives, now you got me off. One of the initiatives is called the Walls of Jericho. Okay, and in the Wars of Jericho, I use that analogy because when the Israelis had to engage in their first battle, God gave them a military strategy which made no sense. Okay, defy conventional wisdom. But what God was basically asking them was to trust and have faith in Him. We need to instill faith in our people that this is a battle that we can win.
Yeah, amen, amen. I mean, I think just quickly on that, it's very moving. I think that we need a reimagining of a theology of human rights. Human rights have been violated, right? This is beyond civil. This is, and the forum for human rights in the United States is where? The United Nations, just right across. Over at Union Seminary. So I serve at Union Theological Seminary, and recently we partnered with the Poor People's Campaign. The Dr. King reimagined work from Reverend Dr. Barber to advocate for the poor. And they had an audience with the United Nations on the issue of poverty here in the United States. Why not think of the United Nations as a forum for our grievances, right? Our constitutional rights not being protected. My fear is we saw with the protest in Puerto Rico, we understand there's always going to be people that incite, but the over-militarized response, especially in an administration where we see a Mike Pence who's very happy to support Joe Arpaio, who violated immigration rights, right? Mike Pence is going to be the next president within the next year, right? Like there is a repressiveness that the religious community authorizes with this current administration and the federal government, and there needs to be a counter to that that says, no, you will not militarize our children that are protesting because you closed 270 schools. You will not continue to not audit the deaths and the debt. I mean, 57 official deaths when the New York Times did a report of 1,000. Why is Congress not acting? Speak to the United Nations. And the debt. We know that a lot of it is usurious. It is contracts that unfortunately failed politicians in Puerto Rico engaged with municipal bondholders. We know a lot of that debt is illegal, at least 20 or 30 or 40% of it. Why is nobody auditing that and we're making decisions of austerity based on unconstitutional debt? So I think that the human rights framing is a necessary platform, and I just want to thank you because I feel that's what's tugging at my spirit.
By the way, there is a group of lawyers from Puerto Rico and from the United States who are already bringing this issue to the United Nations outside, and we need to find out more about that and do something with that.
I mean,
Any way we can connect with them?
There is an investigative group, and because it's an illegal debt, and so they're going to sue and really, challenge the debt that they say that we have. Okay, and and speaking, you stated, Rosa, that organizations going, like I am not connected to any type of policy organizations that can make a change. But the silent procession, and we dealt with the mental health issue way before anyone did. Okay, because the voice of the silent procession is in banner form. And it was led by Memoriam for Lives Lost. The second one was USA Citizens, in demanding, look, we're USA citizens, treat us equally. The third was Surviving Trauma, which encompassed the mental health issues and also the suicides. And of course, Rebuilding Puerto Rico. So, the intent of the silent procession is getting that support outside of the Puerto Rican community, okay? People from here, from New York, that can send a letter. We need the support outside of the Puerto Rican community.
When's the next march?
September 23rd.
So that would be what looks like that could happen is we should send out at the end of this conversation a couple of action items and notes, and anybody wants to share. We have the letter for Carlos. If the people, I'll email you, and if you could sign that or just respond saying yes, we would like to send, or feel free to send it out. I think B, the date for the silent procession. I think C, how do we connect with those lawyers to start at least, because I think that the June 1st date is a powerful date to do a public demonstration because of opening season, and faith leaders are able to participate, but not only faith. I'm a universalist. Yo soy bien, I'm an intersectionalist, universalist. My parents were pentecostal de la cabeza hasta los pies. So I think that my framing is a bit more universalist, and I think that we are using, I call trans-political and trans-religious language, right? It's transpartidista. We're not talking about something that benefits either party when we call on the United Nations, right? So I think that was, and the segues you're throwing us into are very
So if I could just say just one last
Absolutely.
thing, that the whole purpose is getting those people here that can write letters to senators, to congressmen, that kind of support. The domino effect is that once we get that support, they're going to advocate for us. They're going to fight for Puerto Rico. So that's what I wanted to say.
Okay. Two themes very quickly run through the initiative. One of them is the role that faith and hope play in Puerto Rican resilience. Fear and hopelessness are enemies of resilience. Faith and hope is their shield. Faith produces resilience, and hope is an essential element of not only good mental and physical health, but a powerful motivator generating increased resilience for adversity. Now, I want everybody watching and listening to when they get home tonight to open their Bibles and listen to the words of the Apostle Paul in 2 Corinthians chapter 4, 8 through 9. We are pressed on every side by troubles. We are not, We are pressed on every side by troubles, but we are not crushed. We are perplexed, but we are not driven to despair. We are hunted down, but never abandoned by God. We get knocked down, but we are not destroyed. Okay. The second is that we're one. Somos uno. The idea that somehow if you're not born in Puerto Rico, somehow you're not truly really Puerto Rican. We feel the pain, the suffering. Okay. And whether you speak Spanish or Spanglish, whether you're born in New York, Puerto Rico, or whether you're born in Hong Kong, somos Puerto Ricanos. And yes, there are some true issues regarding protecting and preserving the culture when you face the ethnic Puerto Rican identity, but we can deal with those issues after this ordeal is done. Okay. One last comment. In order to get these goals together, we're launching initiatives, okay? And the one I want to talk about here very quickly is the what I'm calling Proyecto Retorno, okay? It is based on the biblical narrative known as the post-Babylonian exilic period, where the Jewish people were forced from their homelands and into detention for 70-year period. Two important lessons I want to share with you. First, is that how the Jews kept the vision and hope of one day returning home alive. Now, I understand Puerto Rico is in bad shape. That's why we have people leaving. But if Puerto Rico is truly going to be rebuilt, it needs Puerto Ricans living, working, and worshiping in Puerto Rico. Now, the other important lesson here is that God just didn't send the Jews back empty. He provided resources for them, okay? And so what the initiative is doing is that it's launched a global and international campaign to raise debt-free funding, substantial amount, called Operation Manna in the Desert, for those wanting to return and rebuild Puerto Rico. By debt-free, we don't mean private, we mean private, non-investment dollars or government funds. This is an example of what we mean by actionable faith, okay? What the initiative does is that, we sing in the church, no hay Dios tan grande como él, okay? So let's see him move. We need funds. Now, let me tell you, I was down in Washington, D.C., and I met with a whole bunch of folks. One of them says that the Congress has given Puerto Rico $20 billion of debt-free funding, and we need to applaud that. True, it has political motivations for it, but it's $20 billion. But the problem, as she and I discussed, is that funding coming from the government is full of restrictions. It's full of all kinds of strings. What happened here in the 90s with Bill Clinton when they had this, enterprise zone-free monies? It stayed right there because nobody had access to it. They're aware of it, and they're going to try to do something. I am right now in the process, and we have identified an international trust with deep pockets, okay? And we're in discussions right now to bring some monies so that we can do what we have said we're going to do, get that energy, get the infrastructure and all of that politically free, okay? Esa es otra cosa. And so pray for that. Okay? Ask God to show his hand. I'm not afraid to say what I'm saying because I believe in the practical world that God is great, God loves, and that he will provide for Puerto Rico. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Reverend, for that comprehensive and well thought and framed presentation. My question is, how much time do we have left? Because I would like to show the video.
It's 12:18 right now.
Yeah.
We started
You have like 12 minutes, yeah.
Okay, good. So I'm going to show the video real quick.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you very much. This is video put together by the Reverend Damaris Whittaker, who is over at Fort Hamilton Collegiate, which is part of the Collegiate family of churches. So this just shows some of the work that they did. So maybe if we could play and just dim the lights a bit. That way folks can see. And hopefully folks at home can see at Zoom. And maybe some audio. Yeah, it looks like it's muted. So Reverend Whittaker couldn't be here with us today.
Unfortunately, we couldn't leave student loan because we couldn't find tickets. So we finally were able to get there in November 2017. And that's where we began economic development, women's rights, LGBTQ rights organization. And through my diplomatic, we were able to identify vulnerable population that is located in the most centered town in the island. And there in Orocovis, there's a community called Miraflores, Abajo Barrio, where it has the highest per capita in the community. It's forgotten, right? Olvidados, we go up the most sign that says Los Olvidados, the forgotten, right?
The biggest thing that I learned in Puerto Rico were that there was heavily marginalized community that they were in. So that all of them, and they sit up way up in the mountain, and they're so remote. So I found it strange that exists this incredible polarized community for the town that we are working with. They're a slave background, and so they stay and they work their children. They happen.
We're fundraising more individual churches like the Washington Community Church, Middle Church. In our ministry at intersections, we have been to on our trips and our initiatives. That fundraising at this moment has allowed us to restore the area in the school and bring hundreds of solar lights, water chargers, food, and other supplies.
What we did basically went to house to house, visited the community, recommended Damaris, real care.
They will not only deal with economic development, they will deal with health, education, and economics. And it will be self-sustained with solar power, with our partners for City Power, which have come alongside the churches, an amazing job. The so-called our volunteers, the solar power panels in different organizations, and allowing communities to come in place where they can charge their phones and have an evening where they can meet with children.
And it's been an incredible relationship, knowing their stories and seeing their needs. So by asking, we can get firsthand information, facilitate and help and work that way.
And that element there is what we cannot always do well in churches.
why I'm so proud to be part of this church. Where we understand that there are different levels of responsibility. That we cannot stay in the game, that we will fix temporary sustainability. These are the marginalized within the marginalized. And if we're going to be church, we're all.
Excellent. So that was a brief video, and then I just want to show a really quick image here of the actual letter that we are thinking about. And I hear my background feedback right here. So we put so if you see here, I'm just going into my Twitter account because we have a potential letter that someone was able to draft quickly. So this is the NYU letter. I just wanted you to see it in case, because I think, right, the idea is that Centro is going to publish or could publish some of the information at the end of the plenary session. Maybe, you know, this letter on behalf of Carlos could be highlighted by Centro. So it says, "Dear Dr. Hamilton," which is the NYU president, you know, the Bronx Coalition, this is the group that had worked with Carlos to highlight this. For Maria Evacuees is an advocacy group whose mission is to create and sustain a safety net that serves individuals and families who are displaced by Hurricane Maria. Our goal is to engage organizations, government officials who serve displaced Puerto Rican families. Now, we applaud New York University for activating a Hurricane Maria assistance program in collaboration with universities in Puerto Rico. We got to change that. HMAP saves lives by addressing key social determinants of health. HMAP is the Hurricane Maria assistance program for families, for students that are coming here. So we frame the social injustice of all of these issues, which are the needs for mental health services, the self-reported rates of depression and anxiety and suicide in Puerto Rico, pushes us to advocate against the social injustices that individuals like Carlos are facing. So in summary, we ask that NYU join other higher institutions of learning in extending an HMAP program for an additional semester so that these students are allowed an opportunity to fully recover and overcome the devastation that they're experiencing. So that's the ask, right? Like, how do we get the NYU president, who has some connections with some of the churches that we're with, to extend HMAP for at least another semester so folks like Carlos and other students are able to be in this educational setting. And that's something that we'd like to send you all out via email. And if you'd like to just respond with yay or nay. But at the same time, if you have any other connections, we'll probably try to send this on Sunday. So we'll set it up in a kind of format that people can just sign up online. But just wanted to make sure that that was a piece of advocacy we wanted to do here. And any part that Centro can do in advocating for these NYU families is important because Centro has served as a convener. Centro historically has been an educational kind of, I would say, intersection of so many different currents that allows us to use Centro as a platform for raising these issues. So we just want to acknowledge the amazing work that Centro's doing. For all the folks that are listening to us online, please find a way to come next year. I know there's an upcoming event and convening happening in Puerto Rico, correct? What are the dates for the Puerto Rico convening? I think it's June 15th, right? So those are also live streamed. Folks should be aware of that. We're going to send out June 15th in Puerto Rico. And what will happen is that by then, maybe we can have an update. I know they're going to have a faith panel as well, and folks can join on Zoom if you're not there in person. Any closing comments, questions, thoughts, remarks? This was more of a planning session, I think, and a coordinating session because of the intimate numbers we had, which I think is even more effective if we have determined action steps moving forward. So I just want to open to the floor to see if anybody had any questions, comments, concerns, ideas, thoughts. Excellent.
Well, I think we got to all just keep doing what we're doing. there's no other way. I mean, you know, I always put IBM as an example, and what made IBM such a great corporation was that they did horizontal marketing as well as vertical marketing. So whatever it is that we're doing, we just got to keep doing it.
Yeah.
And like, what I can see like in my community is that the church does a lot as far like, because in Holyoke and Springfield, there's a huge density of Puerto Ricans. That people that came from the islands, we saw a lot of that. But I think that the religious leaders are very silent. They're not public about it. They're not really active about it. They're not vocal because they feel that it's political and they don't want any involvement in that. So they want to take a stand when something is wrong because they seem to think that that's political. And I think that's where I see that my area really has to be more public. And some things have to be denounced when they're wrong, but they're not really.
I struggled with that entire conflict my entire life. I grew up in a church that was very apolitical and said todo era del mundo, and we couldn't talk about anything. And there was this retreat from this life. I think that is what we're trying to overcome. So part of what Union Seminary is doing, the institution I represent, is we have a national reach. We're working with, we have around 100 houses of worship that are already going to join in the June 1st action of doing something public. And we want on Saturday, June 2nd, symbolizing, you know, the darkness of the tomb, when that becomes like a public square protest throughout the country in different places with the tarp, right? The tarp is a symbol.
Yes.
The tarp is a symbol of what I think is like the crucifixion that we saw happen. If we think of hurricane season as like the notification of death, right? Like against the Puerto Rican people, the tarp becomes a trans kind of figuration of the cross. And then if the hurricane season starts on Friday, so it's like Good Friday, and that's the idea we want to do. Good Friday, somebody does a liturgy piece, you know, in their house of worship. There'll be same hashtags, social media stuff. Do something with the tarp. We're creating, Reverend Whittaker, we're partnering with her and the collegiate churches to create a liturgy kind of toolkit to just send to everyone. And everybody does it in a decentralized way. Saturday, we recommend folks go out into your Central Park, go out to your public square, bring out a tarp and reach out to local media in your place. We're going to be doing something with the United Nations here in New York City. Details to come, and everybody's going to be invited to that. And then Sunday, use the resurrection story as like the insertion of hope for that liturgy, and finding the way to like unveil the tarp from the cross, representing that type of symbolic and I think theologic and spiritual and cultural kind of energy that we need, because I think that we have a crisis of culture and spirit, right? And I'm talking in a very cosmopolitan, very universalist frame. You know, I operate interfaith context, and I understand that, you know, there's more, I would say, exclusivist elements, and we're not trying to co-opt people's religious kind of framing, but I think that this is a human rights issue, and we need to come together.
Okay, so I come out of the Pentecostal evangelical community. And let me say, the fact that the Pentecostals, for instance, are silent doesn't mean that, with regards to politics, doesn't mean that they're not politically active. Okay, originally in the beginning, the reason for the apoliticalness had to do with the expectation of the imminent coming of Christ. So everybody was focused on spiritual things. They were focused on getting everybody ready for the second coming. The Lord did come, okay? Not during that generation, this generation. And this is not atypical. The apostles in the New Testament believed that Christ was coming in their generation, okay? So what happens is that there's been a shift, which most people miss in terms of Pentecostals, conservatives, and evangelical. And that is that they have exchanged their restoration vision, restoration of the New Testament, for a Christian America vision. Now, what does that mean? You might wonder, why is it that evangelicals who were so prone to family values and all of that were supporting Trump, who doesn't seem to have any? I do a apologize if I'm offending some conservative in that particular sense. But the reason is that Trump represents for evangelical the hand of God. What does that mean? According to evangelicals, there was a covenant relationship between God and America, okay, in which, like the children of Israel, they had this covenant relationship, and part of that covenant relationship was that if you do not keep the faith and keep the nation Christian, that God was going to punish you in the same way that God was punishing the Israelites once they stepped outside of what God wanted them to do. So when you listen to Trump talk about making America great, evangelicals interpreted that as meaning restoring America to its America status that it used to be, America nation. So I'm in the churches and I listen to things that just do not make any sense to me. And so this is the explanation, okay? They are silently conservatives, okay? They're not going to step forward and to address issues of Puerto Rico. When the hurricane hit, a lot of people became silent, okay? Very silent, instead of supporting Trump, because they hurt como Puerto Ricans, okay? Yeah. But that's there, and that needs to be unsurfaced. When I was talking to Jonathan, who raised the issue last October or November, I said, let's get together. He was still working for the mayor. We need an educational piece to this as well as some other things, because the churches themselves don't understand the root of where all of this is coming from. Yeah. And I'm convinced that once we begin to expose them to that truth, that they'll be able to put things at least more balanced, whether they do a Republican or a Democrat, that's a different story, but there'll be more balance instead of just following the lead without understanding what and why they're doing it and its impact.
And that's why it's so important to have an I would say, cultural conversation, because we see the Black church with the civil rights movement and Dr. King. He was assassinated once he started being vocal on issues not of civil rights, but of poverty. That's why he was assassinated, Dr. King. And what happened is that the American religion has shifted to worship Trump, which is the embodiment of prosperity gospel, cheap evangelicalism. Right? That is exactly what has happened. It's the worship of Trump in this space. And I think for folks that are silent, your silence is complicit, and that complicity looks like injustice in front of God. And I think that moral underpinning and that moral messaging, it's complicated. I mean, it is very controversial and complicated, but no longer run away from the third rail, let's glide on it. I think that the third rail we need to grab onto it and just like deal with the cantazo the same way that our people have dealt with the cantazo in Puerto Rico. And what emerges will be something interesting. Well, I just want to thank you. I know that we are closing our time. Is there a sign-in sheet that we could put up really quickly so that people could just put down their emails, or you can come to me because we would like to send, I don't know what the process is. I know usually there's sign-in sheets. Excellent. Okay. Excellent. Yeah, if you have just a piece of paper, and if people can just put their like names and emails, I'll have my cards here in case you have any issues, and we'll make sure we send up a follow-up email. Later today or tomorrow with the action items and the letter, and then anything from Centro that Centro needs to like highlight.
Well, I think you definitely do it. I can say you
Awesome.
in terms of talking about GT summit.
Awesome. All right.
What was the date of that?
Yeah. So June 1st, we're going to be releasing a toolkit, Union Seminary. If you have your emails, you'll make sure that you receive the toolkit, which will outline some of the liturgical aspects, right? We think that using the tarps as part of the image is important. Also, the water, Jesus was thirsty, and a lot of our people were thirsty. Instead of giving water, they were giving and a lot of people drank from Superfund sites. So there's a lot of like liturgical issues that we could bring up there. So that's going to be June 1st, June 2nd, and June 3rd. It looks like we have this silent procession march happening.
September 23rd.
Yeah. And you know what? We could keep this as a group. I'll keep emailing updates. Reverend, if you have any updates, but I'll make sure I do that. And we have cards here. And appreciate you all for hanging out with us.